Greetings and welcome back to the Shift Briefing Series. I'm David Pearson. In this video, I want to talk about tactical decision making. I want to talk a little bit about pitfalls that we've all made. I want to talk about some basic considerations. And then I want to provide you with a tactical decision making model created by a friend of mine, Dan Murphy. It'll allow you to take care of calls on a daily basis and handle almost anything. With that in mind, let's get started. I sometimes hesitate to use the term tactical decision making because I think some people look at that like, oh, this is a SWAT thing, and it kind of turns them off. In reality, tactical decision making is something that law enforcement does every day on almost every one of their calls. We get a fact circumstance, we have to make appropriate decisions, and those decisions are short-term in basis usually, and that's why we call them tactical decision making. It doesn't always have to do with tactics and some sort of wild call. So if you can kind of put aside that negative filter that you might have for tactical decision making, I think you're going to find that some of these things are useful. The first thing that I want to talk about are some pitfalls. Now these pitfalls I've made and I've seen some other people make. And I'm only going to talk about two pitfalls. The first pitfall is noble cause mentality. Now I talk about two different kinds of noble cause mentality. The first is kind of a Jeopardy noble cause mentality. It's where an officer goes up and puts themselves in some sort of unsafe situation because they want to help somebody out. And we see that a lot on suicidal calls. I've seen video after video where somebody will be inside of a car with a gun and an officer will be standing within 5 feet of that person. And they are now risking their lives to help save somebody else. And if you remember the safety priorities, we talk about they help us decide what kind of tactics we're going to use. And oftentimes I'll hear somebody say, well, Dave, you know, if somebody wants to risk their lives, that's a personal decision. And I'm like, yeah, no, not so much. And the reason I say that is this. When you pin on the badge, you become part of a family. Now, it might be a dysfunctional family from time to time, and our holiday parties may not be what we want them to be, but we're a family nonetheless. And if we get an officer that goes down in the line of duty, that family will risk their lives to save that person. So it no longer becomes a personal decision when you bring all the family in. The next thing that we talk about is, God forbid that you, and I'm using the you, not necessarily you, but that person that's saying that to me, if you get killed in the line of duty, a lot of people suffer. The nation as a whole mourns for that. Your community mourns, your agency mourns. And last but not least, you're going to have people that know you, your family or friends, and they're going to miss you. So when somebody says to me, hey, this is a personal decision, I really disagree with that. I think that's no longer the case. It's a family matter now. The second part of noble cause mentality is a legal noble cause mentality error. And what I mean by that is, and we have this going on around the country, and again, a lot of this surrounds suicidal subjects, is we have officers that are making entry into homes where there's nobody else other than the suicidal subject in an effort to save their lives. And the reason I call that legal noble cause mentality is, man, we understand that. I understand that. I've done that before. I've made that mistake. And the problem is that if something bad happens, and God forbid somebody loses their life in that, but if something bad happens, a police officer could lose their career. They could go to jail. They can lose their family over that. Their agency can get sued. So there's a lot of stuff that is at risk when we start taking this noble cause, this legal side of noble cause mentality, and making decisions that may not be the best that we can make them. So I always caution people that even though your heart's telling you to do that, make sure there's some sort of legal basis for you to be able to do what you're trying to do. The other part about some of our pitfalls, and I'm only going to talk about one more, is ego. And what I mean by that is we have people around the country that are making decisions based upon their ego. They feel like they're smart enough, they're good enough to do those kind of things. And I'm certainly not trying to vilify narcotics units, but they're the stereotypical example that we use. You have detectives that go out, they'll get a warrant for a place and they want to serve the warrant, but they don't want to call a specialized team out. They feel like it takes them too long, or they don't want to make entry and they need that dope that's inside the house. So what they do is they saddle up, they kick the door, they run through the house with their hair on fire, and then we're getting people around the country hurt and killed because of that ego type of decision making. And again, narcotics units are not the sole units that err on that side. Patrol does that. All special units have the potential to do that. So I'm just using that as an example. The next thing I want to talk about are some considerations for your tactical decision making. The first thing I think that is important is you need to know the experience, training, and capabilities of the team that you're working with. And pick the team, patrol, special operations, SWAT, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. There are some times that you have brand new members on there that may not have the same level of skill. And we always talk about this quote from Mark Neal, and we talked about this in one of our other videos, is you're not going to rise to the occasion, you're going to fall to the level of your training. So you might want to shoot like Bond and fight like Bourne, but unless you've trained to that level, you're probably not going to be able to do that. So it's important for you to know those capabilities and training before you ask your team to do something from a tactical decision-making standpoint that they're really not capable of doing. The next thing that we talk about is knowing what you really have on a call. We all know this. There's 4 kinds of calls. There's a non-criminal call, suicidal call, a criminal call, or a civil call. And I don't know about you, but I've been on a ton of calls where we're doing a lot of police work only to find out no crime's been committed, so we need to just pack up and leave. So it's important for us to make sure that we get that information as much as we can prior to going. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that sometimes the information that we get may not be exactly what's going on, but we have to have some start. We have to have a good faith basis that what we're doing is based upon the information that we have. And lastly, I suggest that you use a tactical decision-making model. Now, that model that we're going to talk about comes from Dan Murphy. It's called PIETO. But the reason that we really use this decision-making model is we want the officers in the field to have something that is consistent, based in law, policy, and ethics, and it's repeatable and defendable in court. This is one of the reasons that we want to talk about some of the pitfalls. Those pitfalls are not always repeatable. It depends on the people that are there, or how you're feeling in your heart for that particular day. And so that creates some real indecision when those things change. So as an officer in the field, I want to find something that is repeatable, defendable, and I know that I can rely on. And that's where this tactical decision-making model really comes into play. And so when we start talking about the decision-making model, this came from Lieutenant Dan Murphy, as I said before. He's a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine. And he came up with PIETO. And PIETO stands for a couple of things. The first thing that the P stands for are the safety priorities. And I've got another video on the safety priorities, but I always talk about the safety priorities making really tough decisions easy. Once you start plugging the safety priorities in, it kind of clears up what you want to do and where you want to go. The next piece is the I. So we talk about facts and intel. Now, we talked a few seconds ago about the fact that sometimes you get information and it's not correct. So it's important for us to get on scene and get as much information as we can, correct information, and pass that on. We've all been on the robbery call or whatever call where we go looking for the suspect in the neighborhood and we never go talk to the victim. It's important for us to get there, figure out exactly what happened so that we give the best information out. That information is going to be important as we plug into things. This ties back into the concept that we already talked about, the OODA loop, where if we don't go too fast, we have an opportunity to get the best information, make our best decisions, and then disseminate that to the other people that are on the call. Facts and intel also give rise to reasonable suspicion and probable cause that a crime has occurred or has not occurred. That gives us options if we need them. And the options I'm talking about is the ability to use force. And again, you'll always hear, I'm not talking about finding ways to, make up reasons to use force. But when we have limited options to fix a call, it's important that we have all the options available. So if we find out that a crime has occurred, now that gives us an ability to use force to stop somebody and keep them into some level of control so we can fix the problem. The next thing that we talk about is the E, and that's environment and terrain. We all know that environment really can run what's going on. In Colorado, we have snow. In other places, you have temperatures that are really high. That's an environmental concern. Are you dealing with an apartment complex that has, 150 units in it? Or are you dealing with a single house on a piece of property that's the size of an acre? The 30-foot or 30-yard driveway that's in the city is completely different that I deal with than the 1.5-mile driveway that some of our deputies deal with out in the county. So all of those things, the environment and the terrain that we're working with, really kind of drive how we're going to take this problem apart. Our next piece of this is going to be pick the correct tools and tactics. That's the T part of PIETO. We start talking about tools and tactics and picking the correct one. Some of this leads back into the conversation that we had with the 4 C's. Oftentimes, if our patrol division does not have the resources or the training appropriate, we want to call in some additional resources. It's the thing that we talked about with ego, is call in the right teams to do what we need to do. So we can't use active shooter tactics on a hold-up alarm where we've had a shot fired. Those are 2 different circumstances, and we have to use the right tactic there. The other thing that we talk about tactics is think about 3 things, or think in 3s. Think action, reaction, and counteraction. This kind of goes back to the OODA loop that we talked about before. If I do something, if I take an action against a suspect or a subject, I should expect some sort of reaction back from them. Have I thought about my counteraction to the reaction? It keeps me thinking, it keeps me fluid. And so when something happens, I should not be standing there saying, oh, man, I really didn't see that happening. So we want to make sure that we're thinking through those things and picking the correct tools and tactics to use on one of these calls. The last thing that we talk about is our officer instincts. We all have them. It doesn't matter whether you've been in the job 1 day or 30 years. If the hair on the back of your neck is standing up because something's happening that you're not comfortable with, don't push that down. Listen to that voice. Figure out what's going on and then respond to that. I cannot tell you how many patrol calls I've been on where I've used the PIETO model. Almost on a daily basis, when we get on scene of something, some of the first questions that we ask are, hey, what do we got? Well, we have this. All right, do we have any hostages or innocent civilians that are in the way? Okay, if we don't, well, let's slow down a little bit. Let's back up a little bit. Let's take our time. Or conversely, hey, there's somebody inside that house, they're bad. I think their children are inside. Okay, we might start to press this issue a little bit more. We might start getting some more resources on scene. So this PIETO method has really assisted me in my decision making, and you can hear it with the officers out on the street. And the nice thing is that because it's repeatable and defendable, when we go onto a call, it doesn't matter whether I show up or somebody else shows up. We're all talking about the same stuff. We're all looking back at that same model, and we're taking our facts and intel and we're plugging it in there. And so every officer on scene, whether they're there a day or whether they've been there for 30 years, can look at that call and they can say, well, here's what I know, here are the safety priorities, here's kind of how I want to move that, here's the environment that we're dealing with, so let's pick the right tool and tactic. Let's either slow down, let's speed up, let's get closer to the problem, let's back up from the problem. And that's really cool to hear. So I'm really passionate about this particular model because I think it helps everybody out on the street make really good decisions. So this is tactical decision making. I'm hopeful that you liked the video. If you want to see videos on other things, put a comment down below. If you like what you see, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I've got new videos coming out one a month now, and hopefully I'm going to get a little bit quicker. Again, thanks for joining me. Hope you liked the video. And until next time, be smart, be safe, and be efficient. Take care.